At the underestimated species, the Galactic Dominion had ruled the known universe for over 3,000 years. Their empire stretched across 47 star systems, commanding the respect and fear of countless civilizations. At its heart stood three species that had formed an unbreakable alliance: the Kethmori, masters of plasma weaponry and tactical warfare; the Velthari, whose shields could deflect anything the galaxy had ever produced; and the Zixanari, whose computational abilities allowed them to predict enemy movements with terrifying accuracy. For centuries, no species had dared challenge their authority. Their combined fleets numbered in the tens of thousands, each ship a masterpiece of destructive capability. Their technology was so advanced that entire civilizations surrendered at the mere sight of a Dominion scout ship. They had created the perfect war machine, or so they believed. Overlord Kethron stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, gazing out at the stars that belonged to his empire. His scales shimmered with the deep purple that marked him as nobility among his kind. Behind him, holographic displays showed the positions of thousands of ships under his command. He had never lost a battle, never even faced a serious challenge. War for him had become routine, almost boring. That was about to change in ways he could never imagine. The first sign of trouble came from a distant monitoring station in the Outer Rim territories. A small craft had been detected moving through restricted space, completely ignoring the warning beacons that surrounded the area. The ship was primitive by Dominion standards, barely registering on their advanced sensors. Its hull was made of simple metal alloys. Its engines produced basic chemical thrust, and its weapons appeared to be projectile-based. Primitive didn't even begin to describe it. "Another Eski, Avenger species trying their luck," muttered Commander Velthos, the Velthari officer responsible for Outer Rim security. "Should we eliminate them as usual?" Kethron's attention was caught by something unusual in the readings. "Wait, have we encountered this design before?" The ship's computers worked through their vast databases, comparing the craft's signature to known species. After several moments, a result appeared that made the bridge crew exchange puzzled looks. The vessel belonged to a species called humans, inhabitants of a small planet called Earth in an unremarkable system at the very edge of explored space. "Humans?" Kethron's voice carried a note of curiosity. "I don't recall this species being granted passage rights." "They haven't, Overlord," replied Velthos, consulting his records. "In fact, our surveys indicated they've only recently achieved basic spaceflight. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours. They shouldn't even be capable of reaching our borders." Kethron found himself intrigued, despite the apparent insignificance of these humans. Their ship was indeed primitive, but something about its construction suggested a resourcefulness that was uncommon among the galaxy's lesser species. Where most civilizations built with the finest materials available, these humans seemed to have created their vessel from whatever they could find. Yet somehow, it worked. "Bring them aboard," he commanded. "I want to see what manner of creatures would dare enter our space in such a humble craft." The human ship was tractored into the Eternal Dominance's massive hangar bay. Compared to the sleek, energy-efficient vessels of the Dominion, it looked like a piece of scrap metal held together by determination and hope. The hull showed signs of impacts from micrometeorites, the kind of damage that better-designed ships would never sustain. Paint had been applied and reapplied in different colors, creating a patchwork appearance that spoke of constant repairs and modifications. The human ship was tractored into the Eternal Dominance's massive hangar bay. Compared to the sleek, energy-efficient vessels of the Dominion, it looked like a piece of scrap metal held together by determination and hope. The hull showed signs of impacts from micrometeorites, the kind of damage that better-designed ships would never sustain. Paint had been applied and reapplied in different colors, creating a patchwork appearance that spoke of constant repairs and modifications. Three figures emerged from the craft, and Kethron found himself studying them with growing fascination. Humans were smaller than most spacefaring species, with soft skin instead of scales, chitin, or natural armor. They looked fragile, vulnerable, completely unsuited for the harsh realities of space travel. Yet, they had somehow traveled hundreds of light-years to reach Dominion space. The lead human stepped forward, removing something from her head that appeared to serve as protection during space travel. She had long brown hair and eyes that held an intelligence Kethron didn't expect from such a primitive species. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured, despite being surrounded by beings who could easily destroy her. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Space Navy," she said, looking directly at Kethron without any sign of fear. "We were conducting a mapping mission when our navigation systems malfunctioned. We apologize for any intrusion into your territory." Kethron found himself amused by the human's composure. Most species cowered when brought aboard a Dominion vessel. "Earth Space Navy? How pretentious for such a small species. Tell me, Admiral, how many ships comprise this navy of yours?" Elena's expression didn't change. "Currently, we have 12 operational vessels, Overlord, all constructed in the last 5 years since we achieved faster-than-light travel." The Bishop Ridge erupted in laughter. 12 ships? The Dominion had scout fleets larger than the entire human space force. Kethron himself controlled more firepower in this single vessel than the humans possessed in their entire civilization. 12 ships, he repeated, his voice dripping with amusement. "And you call yourselves a navy? How quaint." Elena's companions remained silent, but Kethron noticed they were observing everything around them with intense curiosity. Their eyes moved constantly, studying the alien technology, the ship's layout, the behavior of the crew. They weren't cowering in fear. They were learning. "Your technology is fascinating," said one of them, a man who appeared older than the others. "I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, chief engineer of our expedition. The energy efficiency of your systems is remarkable." Commander Velthos snorted in disgust. Primitives attempting to understand superior technology. How amusing. But Dr. Chen continued, apparently unfazed by the insult. "The way you've integrated plasma containment with gravitational field manipulation. We've theorized about such possibilities but never seen them implemented. The mathematics alone must be incredibly complex." Catherine found himself slightly unsettled by the human's ability to understand even the basics of Dominion technology. Most species required decades of study to comprehend even their simplest systems. Yet this primitive engineer was making observations that suggested a level of comprehension that shouldn't be possible. "You understand nothing," Velthos declared. "Your minds are too limited to grasp the sophistication of our designs." Elena stepped forward again. "Perhaps, but we're quick learners, and we adapt to whatever challenges we face. It's served us well so far." "Adaptation," Catherine mused. "An interesting choice of words. Tell me, Admiral, what challenges have you faced that required such adaptation?" Elena's eyes took on a distant look. "Our planet isn't as hospitable as most worlds that develop spacefaring civilizations. Harsh climates, limited resources, frequent natural disasters. We've had to learn to make do with whatever we could find, to repair things that others might consider beyond saving, to find solutions when conventional approaches failed. And now you think these survival skills qualify you to travel among the stars?" Kethron's tone was condescending, but something about the human's quiet confidence was beginning to disturb him. "They've gotten us this far," Elena replied simply. The third human, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Ambassador Zixatal of the Dominion Council, I presume," she said, addressing the insectoid figure who had been observing the exchange with multifaceted eyes. Zixatal clicked his mandibles in surprise. Few species could identify individual members of the Council on sight. "You are correct, human. I am indeed Ambassador Zixatal. How did you recognize me?" "We study those we might encounter," the woman replied. "I'm Captain Sarah Morrison, our diplomatic officer. We believe in being prepared." "Prepared," Zixatal repeated, his voice carrying a note of calculation. "Interesting. And what, precisely, were you prepared for when you entered our space?" Sarah's expression remained neutral. Whatever we might find, we hoped for peaceful contact, but we understand that not all species share our desire for diplomatic solutions. Kethran felt a chill run through him at the implications of that statement. These humans had entered to Dominion space, knowing they might face hostile contact, yet they had come anyway with only a single small ship. Either they were incredibly foolish, or they possessed some capability he wasn't seeing. "You speak of diplomatic solutions," he said carefully, "yet you travel through restricted space without permission, in vessels that could be considered primitive weapons. How are we to interpret your intentions?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "As peaceful but determined. We're explorers, Overlord, not conquerors, but we won't be turned away from our goals by threats or displays of superior force." The bridge fell silent at her words. No one spoke to the Dominion leadership in such a manner. Species far more advanced than these humans had submitted without question, when faced with even a fraction of the firepower surrounding them now. Kethran felt his temper beginning to rise. "You dare to defy the Dominion? With 12 primitive ships?" "We don't seek defiance," Elena said calmly, "but neither will we submit to anyone simply because they possess superior technology. We've learned that sometimes the strongest species aren't the ones with the biggest weapons." Dr. Chen stepped forward again. "If I may, Overlord, we've observed that many advanced civilizations eventually stagnate. They become so reliant on their technology that they forget the innovative thinking that created it in the first place. Sometimes a fresh perspective can reveal possibilities that experience overlooks." Velthos snarled at the implied insult to Dominion capabilities. "You suggest that your primitive minds could improve upon our perfection?" "Not improve," Dr. Chen replied thoughtfully. "Perhaps approach differently. You've achieved remarkable things through the application of vast resources and advanced materials. We've had to achieve similar results through innovation and improvisation. Different paths to similar destinations." Kethran found himself genuinely unsettled now. These humans weren't behaving like any species he had encountered before. They showed proper respect for Dominion power, but they weren't intimidated by it. They acknowledged their technological inferiority, but they didn't seem to consider it decisive. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to have some plan or capability they weren't revealing. "You speak boldly for representatives of such a minor species," he said finally. "Perhaps it's time you understood the true scope of Dominion power." He gestured to the holographic displays that showed the positions of his fleet. Thousands of ships appeared in the projection, each one more powerful than anything these humans could possibly possess. The display zoomed out to show similar fleets throughout Dominion space, revealing a military force so vast that it dwarfed most species' entire populations. "This is merely a fraction of our strength," Kethran continued. "We have ended civilizations far more advanced than yours without significant effort. Your 12 ships would be destroyed before they could even target our vessels." Elena studied the display with the same calm intensity she had shown throughout the encounter. "Impressive," she admitted. "Your organizational capabilities alone are remarkable. The logistics of coordinating such a force across multiple star systems must be incredibly complex." Zixtal clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. "Indeed. Most species surrender when they realize the futility of resistance against such overwhelming force." "Most species," Elena repeated thoughtfully. "But not all?" The question caught Kethran off guard. In truth, there had been a few civilizations that had resisted despite impossible odds, but they had been destroyed so thoroughly that their names were barely remembered. He decided not to mention them. "All eventually submit or are eliminated," he said instead. Elena nodded slowly. "And which would you prefer from humanity?" The directness of the question surprised him. "You offer a choice? How presumptuous." "We're practical people, Overlord. We understand reality, but we also believe in standing up for our principles. So we're offering you the same choice you've given other species. You can accept humanity as an independent civilization with the right to explore and expand, or you can try to force us to submit. Catherine stared at her in disbelief. You would challenge the Dominion? With 12 ships? Elena's expression remained unchanged. If necessary, yes. The bridge erupted in laughter again, but Catherine found himself unable to join in. Something about the human's quiet confidence was deeply disturbing. She wasn't bluffing, wasn't trying to intimidate him with empty threats. She was simply stating a fact as she saw it. Very well, he said finally. Since you seem to believe your species possesses some hidden capability, I will give you the opportunity to prove it. You have one standard galactic month to return to your home system and prepare whatever defense you believe possible. After that period, a Dominion task force will arrive to accept your formal surrender. Elena inclined her head slightly. And if we refuse to surrender? Then your species will be eliminated as a potential threat to galactic stability. This is the choice you have demanded. I suggest you choose wisely. As the humans were escorted back to their ship, Catherine found himself puzzling over their behavior. Every instinct told him they possessed some capability he wasn't seeing, some plan they hadn't revealed. But what could a species with 12 primitive ships possibly do against the might of the Dominion? He was about to find out that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are those who have nothing left to lose and everything to prove. When humans fight back. One galactic month later, Cathron's task force arrived at the edge of the human home system. He had brought what he considered overwhelming force, 50 of the Dominion's most advanced warships, each one capable of reducing a planet to rubble. It was, by any reasonable measure, massive overkill for dealing with 12 primitive human vessels. The fleet moved into formation at the system's edge, sensors sweeping for any sign of human military activity. What they found was puzzling. Instead of the expected concentration of ships around Earth, human vessels were scattered throughout the system. Some appeared to be near asteroid mining operations, others were positioned around the outer planets, and a few seemed to be engaged in construction projects on various moons. Tactical assessment? Catherine demanded. Commander Velthos studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. It's unusual, Overlord. Their ships aren't in any recognizable military formation. They appear to be going about normal civilian operations. Perhaps they've decided to surrender without resistance, suggested Zixtal. Many species choose to submit rather than face certain destruction. But Catherine's instincts told him something different was happening. The humans had been too confident during their first encounter to simply give up without a fight. There was something here he wasn't seeing. Open a communication channel to their fleet, he ordered. The main display activated, showing the bridge of what appeared to be the same primitive human ship they had encountered before. Admiral Elena Vasquez appeared, looking as calm as ever despite facing a force that could annihilate her entire species. Admiral, Catherine began formally, you have had 1 month to consider our terms. Will humanity submit to Dominion authority, or must we proceed with more decisive action? Elena's expression didn't change. We've given your offer careful consideration, Overlord. I'm afraid we must respectfully decline. A murmur of disbelief ran through the Dominion bridge crew. Even facing impossible odds, these humans were maintaining their defiance. Very well, Catherine replied coldly. Then you have chosen extinction. Your species will serve as an example to others who might consider challenging Dominion authority. Perhaps, Elena said quietly. Or perhaps this will be remembered as the day the Dominion learned that size isn't everything. Before Catherine could respond, the human ships throughout the system began to move. But instead of forming a defensive line or attempting to flee, they did something completely unexpected. They scattered further apart, each vessel heading in a different direction at maximum speed. They're running, Velthos announced with satisfaction. Cowards! They speak boldly but flee when faced with real conflict. But Catherine wasn't so sure. The human movement seemed too coordinated to be panic, too purposeful to be mere flight. "Track all vessels. I want to know where they're going." The Dominion fleet began pursuit, their superior speed allowing them to rapidly close the distance to the fleeing human ships. Within minutes, the first engagement began as a Dominion cruiser intercepted one of the smaller human vessels near an asteroid field. What happened next would change everything. The human ship didn't attempt to fight the cruiser directly. Instead, it dove into the asteroid field, weaving between the floating rocks with a precision that seemed impossible for such a primitive vessel. The Dominion cruiser followed, confident in its superior firepower and shielding. Then the asteroids began to explode. Not from weapons fire, but from carefully placed charges the humans had somehow managed to position throughout the field. The explosions were perfectly timed and positioned to create a chain reaction, turning the entire asteroid field into a deadly maze of flying debris. The Dominion cruiser, designed for open space combat, found itself struggling to navigate the suddenly chaotic environment. "Impossible," Velthos breathed. "When did they have time to mine an entire asteroid field?" The answer came from Dr. Chen's voice over the communication channel. "We've been preparing for this possibility since we first encountered your fleet, Commander. Did you really think we spent the last month doing nothing?" As if to emphasize his point, more asteroid fields throughout the system began exploding in carefully orchestrated sequences. Each detonation was precisely calculated to create maximum disruption for large vessels while leaving smaller, more maneuverable craft relatively unaffected. But the real surprise was yet to come. The human ships that had seemed to be fleeing suddenly reversed course, and as they did, their appearance began to change. Hull plating that had appeared to be simple metal began to shift and reconfigure. Additional weapon systems emerged from hidden compartments. Engine signatures changed as more powerful drive systems came online. They've been disguising their true capabilities, Kethran realized with growing alarm. Those weren't primitive ships at all. Elena's voice came over the communication channel, and for the first time, Kethran heard a note of satisfaction in her tone. "You're partially correct, Overlord. Our ships were built with whatever materials we could find, just as I told you, but we've learned to make the most of whatever we have to work with." The human vessels began their attack, and Kethra quickly understood why they had seemed so confident. They weren't fighting like any species the Dominion had encountered before. Instead of trying to match superior technology with superior technology, they were using tactics no one had prepared for. Human ships would dart in close to Dominion vessels, attach something to their hulls, then retreat before the enemy could respond effectively. At first, the Dominion crews assumed these were some kind of primitive explosive devices. They were wrong. The attachments were electromagnetic pulse generators, crude but effective devices that could temporarily disrupt even advanced Dominion systems. A ship would suddenly find its shields failing, its weapons offline, its navigation systems scrambled. In those brief moments of vulnerability, other human ships would strike with precisely targeted attacks aimed at critical systems rather than attempting to destroy the entire vessel. "They're not trying to overpower us," Velthos realized with growing concern. "They're trying to disable us." It was a tactic no one had prepared for because no one had ever needed to. Every previous opponent had tried to match Dominion firepower with their own advanced weapons. These humans were fighting an entirely different kind of war. Dr. Chen's voice came over the communication channel again. "You might be interested to know that every one of those EMP devices was built from salvaged components we found in your own territory. Amazing what people throw away when they have access to unlimited resources." Kethran felt a chill run through him at the implications. The humans had been studying Dominion technology, learning its weaknesses, preparing countermeasures. They had turned the Dominion's own discarded materials into weapons. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. It was a tactic no one had prepared for because no one had ever needed to. Every previous opponent had tried to match Dominion firepower with their own advanced weapons. These humans were fighting an entirely different kind of war. Dr. Chen's voice came over the communication channel again. You might be interested to know that every one of those EMP devices was built from salvaged components we found in your own territory. Amazing what people throw away when they have access to unlimited resources. Kethran felt a chill run through him at the implications. The humans had been studying Dominion technology, learning its weaknesses, preparing countermeasures. They had turned the Dominion's own discarded materials into weapons. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As the battle continued, Kethran began to notice something disturbing about the human ship movements. They were too coordinated, too precise. No communication delays, no hesitation, no confusion. It was as if all 12 ships were being controlled by a single mind. How are they maintaining such perfect coordination? He demanded of his communications officer. The answer came not from his crew, but from Captain Sarah Morrison over the communication channel. Quantum Entanglement Communication Systems, Overlord. Instantaneous communication across any distance. We developed them because we couldn't afford the delays that traditional communication methods would create. Zixatal's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Kethran recognized as extreme agitation. Impossible. Quantum entanglement communication requires computational systems we don't even possess. You're right, admitted Elena. We can't build the same systems you can, so we had to build different ones. Sometimes necessity drives innovation in directions that abundance never explores. The battle was turning into a nightmare for the Dominion forces. Their superior technology was being systematically neutralized by human tactics they had never encountered. Worse, the humans seemed to anticipate every move before it was made. They're reading our tactical patterns, Velthos reported with disbelief. Somehow they're predicting our strategies before we implement them. Elena's voice carried a note of gentle correction. Not predicting, Commander, understanding. We've been studying your military history, your battle tactics, your strategic preferences. You've been fighting the same way for centuries, using the same approaches that brought you victory after victory. But we've had a month to analyze every battle you've ever fought. Kethran felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not just concern for the outcome of this battle, but genuine fear for the future of the Dominion itself. These humans fought like no one they had ever encountered. They adapted, improvised, turned weaknesses into strengths and advantages into disadvantages. More disturbing still was the realization that they weren't trying to destroy the Dominion fleet. Every attack was precisely calculated to disable rather than eliminate. They were demonstrating superior tactical thinking while simultaneously showing restraint. Why? He found himself asking over the communication channel. Why aren't you destroying us when you clearly have the capability? Elena's image appeared on the main display again, and Kethran was surprised to see something almost like sympathy in her eyes. Because destruction isn't our goal, Overlord. We don't want to conquer your territory or eliminate your species. We just want the right to exist as equals, to explore and grow without having to submit to anyone else's authority. But you could, Kethran pressed. You could destroy us. Perhaps, but then we'd become the thing we're fighting against, wouldn't we? The galaxy doesn't need another species that imposes its will through superior force. It needs examples of what cooperation and mutual respect can achieve. Perhaps, but then we'd become the thing we're fighting against, wouldn't we? The galaxy doesn't need another species that imposes its will through superior force. It needs examples of what cooperation and mutual respect can achieve. As if to emphasize her point, the human attacks suddenly ceased. Dominion ships that had been moments away from complete system failure found their power returning, their weapons coming back online, their shields regenerating. This is our demonstration, Elena continued. We've shown that we can defend ourselves, that we're not helpless primitives to be conquered or eliminated. Now we're offering you the same choice we asked for. Accept humanity as equals, or continue this conflict and see where it leads. Kethran stared at the tactical display, trying to process what had just happened. His supposedly invincible fleet had been systematically dismantled by 12 human ships using tactics and technology no one had ever seen before. Worse, the humans had done it without destroying a single Dominion vessel or killing a single crew member. They had proven their point with devastating effectiveness, while simultaneously demonstrating the restraint and wisdom that the Dominion itself had long claimed to possess. "How?" he asked finally. "How did you achieve this in just 1 month?" Dr. Chen's voice provided the answer. "Because we had to, Overlord. When facing extinction, a species either finds a way to survive or it doesn't. We found a way." "And next time?" Velthos demanded. "What happens when we return with a larger fleet, better prepared for your tactics?" Elena's smile was sad but confident. "Then we'll find new tactics, Commander. That's what we do. We adapt, we innovate, we overcome whatever challenges we face. It's served us well so far." Catherine realized with crystal clarity that the galaxy had just changed forever. For 3,000 years, the Dominion had maintained peace through superior force, had prevented conflicts through the threat of overwhelming retaliation. But these humans had just proven that superior force wasn't always decisive, that innovation and determination could overcome even the most advanced technology. More importantly, they had proven that it was possible to be strong without being oppressive, powerful without being destructive. Ambassador Zixtal spoke for the first time since the battle began, his voice carrying a note of genuine respect. "What do you propose, Admiral Vasquez?" Elena's expression became businesslike again. "A treaty recognizing humanity's right to exist as an independent civilization. Trade agreements that benefit both our species. Mutual defense agreements against common threats. And most importantly, a promise that neither side will attempt to impose its will on the other through force." "And in return?" Catherine asked. "We'll share our innovations with any species interested in learning them. Not our weapons technology, but our approaches to problem solving, our methods of making the most of limited resources, our techniques for turning disadvantages into advantages." Catherine found himself considering the offer seriously. The demonstration had proven that humanity was no longer a minor species that could be dismissed or conquered. They had become a power in their own right, one that could potentially threaten the stability of the entire galaxy if they chose to do so. But they weren't choosing domination, they were choosing cooperation. "Very well," he said finally. "The Dominion accepts your proposal. Humanity will be recognized as an independent civilization with full rights and privileges." As the two fleets began to separate, Catherine found himself reflecting on what had just occurred. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion had encountered a species that could match their capabilities without copying their methods. The humans had found their own path to power, one based on innovation rather than accumulation, cooperation rather than domination. Perhaps most importantly, they had proven that sometimes the most powerful response to overwhelming force isn't greater force, but superior thinking. The galaxy would never be the same, and somehow, Catherine suspected, it would be better for the change.